Awesome. Okay, today is October 10th. This is a meeting of the SIG Network Policy API subgroup to SIG Network. This is a CNCF certified meeting, so let's be friendly and have a good one today. So not too much on the agenda, but I think one topic that will spur quite a bit of conversation. Right now on the agenda, I just wanted to poke that the URL for the ANP website's finally done. So we're incorporated with Kubernetes Netlify. Thanks, Ricardo, for all the pointers there. And there's still some to-dos on the website. Raul, thanks for opening that issue. I would share my screen and show that if I could, but I'm having some issues with Zoom. Thanks for opening some issues there. There are some issues related to website stuff on the repo, so I hope to get those done before KubeCon. That's my goal at least. And I'm also going to add a label in the repo for website issues. So if you see anything, feel free to open up an issue and we'll keep making it better. Yeah, and if any folks want to grab new issues, those are great ones for new contributors. So help out with the website. Let's make it better. And yeah, I think that's all I have for admin network policy. Implementations are ongoing. I believe Yang hasn't been around for a while, but he should be implementing it for Antria, and I'm working on implementing it with Oven along with some other folks. So should have some updates on that soon. Any other questions about AMP? What's going on there? Oh, and we have one exciting thing. I got a talks accepted at KubeCon in Detroit for the Contributors Summit around admin network policy. So we'll have like a 25-minute session exclusively for that, and we'll be highlighting it in the SIG Network intro and deep dive as well. So get some noise, hopefully get some more contributors and more voices. Cool. Okay, and I believe now we're gonna start brainstorming about network policy in the multi-network world. I guess, Rahul, did you add this one to the agenda?
Yeah, that's me. Always trying to stir the pot.
That's what this meeting's for.
That's excellent. There were several
yeah.
that are very interested in it.
So I mean, I'm hoping that contrary to expectations, this isn't too crazy. Like just to set the stage of what I was going for, I had the realization or the suspicion that we're more likely to see multi-network implementations come out before we get any sort of consensus on what a network policy v2 multi-cluster, multi-network inclusive thing looks like. Yep. And so I thought was, what if we just start small and say, let's make sure that the existing network policy API isn't undefined in a multi-network world. Let's just sort of say it does something. It may not be
a lot of time on this actually.
Oh, you did? Okay, perfect.
Yeah, and sort of that was part of me. I mean, Andrew knows. About 2 years ago, I had this because I didn't think that Kubernetes networking was going to work with multi-networking and everything. And then one day, this guy said, yes, it does. So what's cool with network policies is, right, they talk only about, say, workloads and how they relate to each other, and how these workloads also relate to things that are external to the cluster, right? So it doesn't say anything about which IP address or which network that was used to connect. It's not there. And what this boils down to is that you need to have basically a way to reduce an IP address to a workload. And also an easy way when you want to do the ingress egress rules to sort of know if an address is part of the cluster or not. That sort of is too often. And if you have those two things in mind, then the whole concept as it works on one network works as well as any network. This puts some sort of questions rather on multi-network. And if you follow the last debate, I mean, that in reality, Ed and I brought up. So one of the problems, sort of the worst case scenario that you can get to is that someone strings one L2 network, that you have a number of pods connect to it from one cluster, you have another pods connected from another cluster, and then you have external objects on it, right? So if you just use what you have in network plumbing group and what you can do with Multus. You can just string L2s, right? You cannot build any higher level concepts. So what Ed brought in, part of them from Network Service Mesh, is this idea to talk about connectivity rather, and you can put requirements on that. Well, I want the IPAM for these pods to be built this way. I mean, I would always say that you want to have the pods from one node share sort of an address scope, and you want your cluster to share an address scope, and that would make the implementation sort of have a much better idea where addresses come from, because otherwise you literally would have to, in every part of the system, know all the addresses of all the pods, which doesn't scale very well. So I would say that it rather puts requirements. So the network policies rather put requirements back on multi-networking, so to make it possible to implement network policies in a decent way. And since it's today the CNI that does it, right? So if you would go sort of Ed's way, and then the way that networks are set up can also be decided and follow best practice by the implementation that also would do the filtering, it's very, very possible. So I think we should sort of push very, very hard on that. There is no addresses in any specification except for the ingress egress. That's also go to the multi-networking, right? We don't want to see Neutron built in Kubernetes as Ed described it. I was part of that stuff, and it went horrible.
Well, I mean, what I've seen in this doc from Raul is more like not necessarily where we're going with whatever the multi-network, solidifies on in the future. It's more like, can we already say like what we're going to support for what is already there, which I think is just network attachment definitions, right? Is that what you were saying, Raul?
Right. Like, yeah, all I want to clarify is, are there any reasonable restrictions we can place on this is how network policy behaves? Or are we deciding that, hey, if you try to mix network policy and multi-network, that is bad news and it's never going to be supported? Like, I'm just saying, we should have a opinion solely on that of network policy plus multi-network. Does it work? What does it do? Or do we just say, no, it's completely busted, there's no hope? I don't think that's the case, but
if you look at what, and sort of this is not enough for me. If you look at Tomo has been doing, and also Doug with Multus, they started to do multi-network filtering, right, in Multus. But he made this assumption that there is no routing between networks, so that a pod can only talk to another pod sort of over a specific network. So all the addresses would always come from the network. Basically, both source and destination will be on the same L2 always, which to me is useless.
Right. But that's the assumption today, right?
Yeah,
that's where that network policy that
it's fine for the implementation of like a CNI to make such restrictions, right? But you cannot say from the generic part when it comes to networking to say that, oh, that's how it has to be.
No, right. I don't think we'll be able to make that assumption like moving forward. But for now, like that's the assumption we have to work with. And I linked the network plumbing working groups version of network policy, which literally just adds a net attached def flag to say like we're going to apply this policy to network 1 or network 2.
I did a sort of slides, I think it's almost 2 years ago now. That sort of went through this, and that's basically how our implementation will look. Where we first do a reduction address to workload and how that sort of works. In reality, if you want to have overloaded addresses, you would have to know address domain and address linked to pod, and the pod is then linked to the workload, right? And the filters works like just fine. So I think we should be very careful with changing the semantics that's already there, and rather sort of look into and ensure that the current semantics around both the type of network policies we have can be upheld.
I agree. I mean, can someone present the doc? It might make more sense to be concrete about this.
Yeah. Do you wanna let me give you host? I can't share it because I updated my Fedora and here we are. I'm gonna give you co-host.
This is why I don't use Linux anymore.
I actually
Microphone, screen sharing, nothing works.
my new laptop is on the way.
I'm sorry. I don't want to derail this. I'm sorry.
No,
Just go
no,
ahead,
you
Rahul.
aren't derailing it. I'm waiting on a new laptop so I can
Okay.
join that. Sorry, Rahul, go ahead.
No worries.
I have a Windows VM in a Fedora running since 2010. I think this one is. Yeah.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Or yeah, okay. So this is kind of what I was playing around with. And basically the things that I want to talk about today is just, I'm not trying to talk about extending the API, right? We just want to talk about what does the existing API do. And for now, we're going to pretend we're single cluster only just to keep matters tractable. We'll have to deal with multi-cluster eventually, but I'm hoping we can, tackle that one bite at a time. And then as far as network behavior goes, I called out some of the things that we were mentioning where in this case, I'm saying we shouldn't assume the networks are partitioned or unroutable. We may want to behave in a certain way, but I think we should assume that traffic could end up anywhere. And just an assumption that no pods have to be connected to all networks. I think the first assumption is pretty straightforward, which is the pod selector bit of the network policy. It should apply to all network attachments. Don't do anything special or magical about, default network or whatever it ends up being. Just select all the attachments. Does anyone have any comments on that? I think that's reasonably.
Anything else will just be a can of worms.
Do we want to provide the option though to specify? I think like by default, this is a good assumption. This is a great assumption, but like, do we want to provide an option to specify network policy for one network attachment versus another, or one network versus another?
Probably, but my concern is from what I've seen, modifying the existing API is tricky. And like in whatever successor we have, we almost definitely want that. But I'm assuming that the network policy API as it stands is pretty much frozen. Like that's where this doc is coming from, is the assumption that it's impossible to make any real changes.
So the thing is this, right? If you don't mention it at all, then things will work. As soon as you start adding in things, networks now can be added on the fly. So I mean, networks and a pod can be attached to a new network, through an API. So if you start saying, oh, these are the ones you should use it, or we can have the other way around. You have to say which shouldn't use, but I think that makes no sense. It's a firewall.
Yeah, no. I totally generally agree. And rewinding to Rahul's point, like, yeah, I think we've seen as a group over a year and a half, getting stuff into existing netpol is pretty much impossible. So I tend to agree. The only wrench in the iron there is like, I keep hearing stirrings about wants for a V2 of network policy, but haven't had anyone still own it. So I think that's what it's going to take to get anything done ever with it personally. And it's not like an easy task, but we just need someone, like the community's here to help. We just need someone to own it, right?
Can a network interface actually follow the same approach of the rest of the things in Kubernetes and have like a label? So when you attach multiple interfaces or something like that, you know that actually that network contains a label, and you use in the network policy the label of that network instead of saying that's the name of the network.
So I'm sure where things are going when things becomes sort of visible in the API, that's a very possible solution, right? Because then they're visible. So why wouldn't we be using labels? We use labels.
I don't want to bring the solution right now. I'm just questioning, like Rahul is bringing the problem on the multi-network and the network attachments, and you raised something about like the network you you can add and remove them on a dynamic way today, right? So I'm just thinking that maybe as part of the proposal, we have not like the network whatever, but a label as an example, and select
But we
the
have
same
to
way
see
that
what
we do in
happens. We'll have to
Kubernetes.
see what happens in the multi-network group, right? I think here, keep an eye on
Yeah,
what's happening, and then when we're in the multi-network group, keep the sort of the fight there. Sort of whatever we come up with there should match with the policies.
yeah. I mean, okay,
wanted to
I'll be
say-
quiet.
Oh yeah,
No, I mean, it's a good suggestion. I was thinking that the whole point of the network, the multi-network change is to not make it a tacked on feature, but rather a first like native support. And if we did something like having a reserved label, like kind of like what we did for the namespace name, if we started doing that, that might undermine the efforts of the network policy or the multi-network cap was my thinking. I don't know if that's
we should wait to see what
overbroad.
happens there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's going to be there's going to be enough people that are going to be in both efforts, and also sort of kube proxy. Sort of, I think there's at least 4 persons that are attending sort of cross.
But overall, I think this is a good assumption. Like it makes total sense. I think people are going to call for more, but like for what we have today, what else can we, it's hard to.
Ricardo, you should book up your Wednesdays at 11.
I should what?
The multi-network meetings.
I have too many meetings in my
It's going
agenda.
to be a lot of. It's going to be. I mean, my chick will be at KubeCon, and I mean, I know he has. I know I will sort of try to work a lot together there. I plan to do like 30 hours or something like that on multi-network.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
I'm
Zoom
trying to
meetings,
get him
I'm
to
done.
get
My
Google
agenda
to
is
get
done.
the meet- I'm trying to get him to get Google to sponsor a fixed meeting room in a hotel or something like that.
Let's see. And the next one's a little bit trickier, I guess. I don't know which way to go on this. This is about the peer selectors, so the to and the from. One tack you can take is that you enforce some sort of network sameness. You say, if I'm only accepting traffic from an endpoint on the same network. I'm not allowing cross network traffic. The other option is to say, no, I as Kubernetes will know the identity of every single network attachment for every single pod, and I'll allow traffic from any network attachment as long as the workload is selected. Those are the sort of 2 tacks you can take there.
So I don't think you can. The first one will be very hard because you assume when you say something like that, you assume that it's a single L2 that links the pods. And if you look at, I mean, if you look at how the primary network is put together on most systems, you're going to have an L2 per node, and then you're going to route between those L2, and it can be a router. You don't really just use one big network that you put all your nodes on. So if you use the first one for the cluster network, you have L3 connectivity. That's the base for everything we have. So we should never think of L2s. So, and if you're L3, then what is the network? Then you need to figure out how to identify that, because you're not going to be able to do it just by looking at sort of which interface you received it on, and sort of see that and assume then that the other one is on the same network. Basically saying that there's going to be topology on these network objects. It's not just simple VLANs that covers the whole cluster. I think the first one can be hard to do. Okay, you can know the IPAM and sort of know, if you know the IPAM for a network, it would be easy to match back. There's nothing really that says that the IPAM for a network, when we start multi-network, is known to Kubernetes. So then you will have to go and sort of look at endpoint objects and try to understand from that. Then I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's not extremely straightforward. I think the other one is, personally, I like the second one.
I guess the trick with the second one is somehow you need to pass identities like regardless of network. Like if I see traffic, I need to be able to resolve it to, I'm saying identity, but workload. Like I need to be able to resolve arbitrary traffic to a workload,
Oh.
right? Somehow. So it's a similar problem in either scenario.
I mean, it also depends on what's implementing like each network in a given cluster, right? So if you have one CNI hooking up plugins for hooking up interfaces for network A and another hooking up interfaces for network B, that problem becomes a little trickier, right?
Or it might be, don't expect it to work.
Right. Like then the network policy, like today, the network policy implementations are very coupled to a CNI, right? And this would mean like, no, don't do that anymore. Like,
or sort of,
yeah.
if you look at the cube, I mean, so we have all these endpoints, right? So we're saying that the way, maybe it's not the right way, that the way firewall, I mean, the network policy should work, it's not by sort of listening in on the specific CNI and what it talks to, because that could be different. It's not to assume things from an implementation, but actually that has to be communicated through some sort of endpoint object. And that's where the network policy should get implementation. The problem if you have different CNIs is that then you might have different implementation owning different networks. Will you have two network policy implementations then? I don't know. I think you only want to have one in a system.
Right. It's tricky. And it changes the core of how things are done today. Like if someone were to come and ask us what we support today, I think we have to say the first one, right? But if we're talking about the future, we obviously say like, yeah, that would be great. I don't know, just a thought.
That's an interesting
So
point.
it's this identity. So it's one thing to know addresses, and addresses can today be found on endpoints. I mean, if you look how the kube proxy works, right? It looks at endpoints and matches labels to build up the service and the load balancing. I don't know any implementation of network policy that works that way. The one we built does not. Maybe it should. Maybe that's sort of something to discuss and think of. Sort of what makes sense, and also it sort of has to do with when we discuss V6 and the multi-networks that addresses can change basically at any time when you have self-addressing. That a subnet can come up on a network by a route advertisement if you have a single L2, so you can get new addresses added or updated and on any attachment at any point in reality. And then we would need network listeners, and those would have to update the endpoint object. So then the source of truth is then the endpoint object and not what a specific CNI has done. So we need this repository of information that should be used by the network policy engine, so to speak, where it should get this information from. I think that's something we need to
I
work
think that's
toward
tightly coupled with whatever they come up with in this multi-network discussion. Like we're kind of at the will of whatever they come up with in some regards.
I mean, it's really about specifying APIs there, right? They don't say this. A multi-networking will really not say anything about any specific implementation. Then I can implement, of course, and say that if you use my network solution CNI, you cannot use another CNI. Then I can take whatever shortcuts I can.
Right. But today the only way to do, unless I'm wrong, right? That today the only way to do multi-networking in Kubernetes is to use Multis and use net attachment definitions, right?
There are others. I mean, we have our own, but I mean, you use annotations, and then you have implementation of it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And there's nothing standardized truly in upstream Cube. Like the network plumbing working group is kind of outside Cube.
It's becoming part of
Okay,
Kubernetes.
good.
It was started as a group on the side to come up with something that worked in the existing framework. And there's clearly promise with it, as Ed said. What it does is that you can add L2s that you then hang on pods, but that will always be I would say the most. It's not really the way you want to recommend someone to build a network structure. And since we don't want to have routers and routing, all that stuff, you cannot build a structure that makes sense from a Kubernetes standpoint, how you would want to have a network topology to attach networks, to have the networks that the pods would be attached to in the sort of most ideal way. It's impossible to specify it with the plumbing group stuff. That's what I mean, if you are on the multi-networks lists, that's what I wrote last week, sort of about this fact that we do not want to add the orchestration API, but without orchestration APIs, you cannot set up topologies. And that's where Ed started to talk about network services, right? So
it sounds like there's no obvious right answer on this one, is what I'm hearing. I mean, I think
it's one of these questions are absolutely great to have. And when we're talking multi-networking, we should go back to them and have them there so they become part of the input when that solution is built.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I think we're a little bit ahead of the you know, gun a little bit. But
Which is good.
yeah, no, it's not a bad thing. Like all these docs you've started putting together, both the FQDN and this, I think will become very important when, you know, the community starts highlighting them more, which they will, right?
Have you pushed this URL into I didn't see in the minutes?
It's in the agenda, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Now I can make comments on.
So I think we can firmly say like your first assumption makes sense. And then for these, the next two, like it's going to depend tightly on like what they come up with and what implementations do. Because we also have to think like what's possible today.
They come up with. To me, it's everyone's responsibility. It's what we can come up with. I mean, here we look at something, but I mean, we need to make sure that what's in the multi-network takes height for that network policies works.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I think these are the only two behaviors that I think really change in a multi-network world. IP block is just sort of IP block. It comes with all the good and the bad that it has already. I don't think anything exciting changes. And L4, it's more of the same. UDP, TCP ports, that all seems to function just fine.
That'd be an interesting kind of a sidebar, like having a meeting on redesigning IP block as a group and seeing what we could come up with. But.
So on the IP block, so let's say I would want to have a default some sort of default rule for traffic that doesn't come from other pods in the cluster. Basically, be able to say from class. I mean, we can make up rules for the pods. I mean, for the workloads and so on. But be able to have something that traps any traffic that comes from the outside and have a complete deny or something like that. How would I express that?
Well, with IP block?
Yeah, so with IP block.
It's when you're talking about ingress with IP block, you kind of, everything goes to shit, right? Because, sorry, bad word. Everything goes away because, you know, it depends on the ingress mechanism. Egress is a little bit easier, but anyway, we digress, I think, from the original conversation. So I'm starting to think we need a place to put these working documents, Rahul.
Yeah.
Because I don't want them to just get lost in the weeds. And I know we have three. We have one on FQDN. We have one on Network Policy V2 that folks started a long time ago. I'm sure is out of date. And then now another one. What do you think is the best way to cement these? Is it to add a README in the network policy API repo with links? Or is it just to put them in the agenda somewhere central? Like, what do you think's easiest?
I'm not sure actually. I mean, I guess the README is probably a decent place to keep them if we're, I guess if we're committed to these particular links and we want to keep them up to date, then it might make sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think it totally makes sense. It's just a matter of how we want to organize it in the repo. We already have a docs directory, and we might be able to put like, you know, upcoming topics. Because I know I have folks who ask me like, well, we want FQDN in network policy. Like, is there something tracking that? And I point them to your doc because there's nothing else, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you need to like take the overhead of putting these in a README yet, but like that'll happen once a KEP happens, right?
Right.
But just somewhere to track them in a centralized place. Like if you opened a PR to put these somewhere in docs, I would definitely +1 it.
That sounds good to me. We can do that. That's pretty straightforward.
Cool. And sorry, are you done talking, asking questions about multi-network stuff or?
Yeah, I'm pretty well tapped on that front.
Cool. I had a customer meeting last week with and FQDN came up like as a desire. And so it's been on my list to take those questions you put in a Google Doc for us and make them into a form. You didn't do that by chance, have you?
I haven't.
Okay, you don't have to. I just wondered if you had done it before I tried to.
No, I mean, actually, I would like to do that, especially in advance of KubeCon, because I know you're going and we have some folks from like the GKE side as well. And if we have a form, it might be easier to just blast it out to people. So I can try to get that done in, like before KubeCon in the next week or so.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. If you send it to me, I can definitely try to push it to the customers I've been meeting with at Red Hat.
Yeah.
But like, it's hilarious in the sense that we've talked a lot about it. And from a customer's perspective, it's every customer I've talked to, it's so black and white. It's like, I literally just want to be able to stop traffic going to this DNS name. Like, that's it. Like, there's no, I don't care about anything else. Like, I want this. And it's a wanted feature. And they're frustrated that we don't have it in upstream.
Yeah.
But I guess, then it falls on one of us to actually make it happen.
Is this a sort of a clash between, I'm an L3 guy from the sort of routing MAC addresses right from the beginning. But I mean, if you look at Kubernetes, you never talk about the addresses. And that's how we specify all the objects, right? And then you bind, in reality, everything to DNS. And that when something gets created, it gets an address and it gets a name. But the name you can sort of understand from what the input you made. So if we will talk about from L7 and L3, this is an L7 rule that's wanted, but it needs to be implemented at L3 or L4.
Yeah, I don't know. I just know that people want it. And, then it always comes back to how do we get it in? I'm almost thinking that what it would be cool if someone had like a little bit of time is if we had like an API playground in the network policy API repo where like you could go in and like we could just play with physical API specs. So you could make like a really quick FQDN policy CRD and try to do an implementation for it.
And combined with that, put up because there's going to be some quality implementation choices, and we also know technology changes, right? I mean, everything is getting encrypted. So, okay, address is still there, but also when the DNS queries becomes encrypted, sort of then it's going to be really hard to break in. I mean, make the assumptions that makes it possible to implement it.
Right.
And,
I just want to make it more fun. I just want folks to come and say like, like KPNG is fun because everyone's just implementing crap.
But you can come up with different scenarios, right? You can say, yes, it's possible to have a dynamic listener. Then this is how you can build it, and this is how it would work.
Yeah.
Or you can say, no, there's no dynamic listener. Then you will have something else, right? That would have to constantly look up all these addresses. But since you don't know what the hell the DNS server that someone goes to is, you will only sort of get a pretty good estimate that you covered that address.
But that's something we could figure out in like a
Yeah,
pre-alpha API
yeah, absolutely.
review, right? Like, I don't know, just an idea. If folks have time, like I would definitely +1 to that.
But it's clear, like anyone that wants to build this application so it can be instantiated pretty much everywhere or anywhere will not want to know anything about IP addresses. And sort of you can get the string of your cluster and sort of build things together, and they have a good idea of what the names will be. You can build on the fly. So if you want to stop something, that's what you want to use.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
so we need a new protocol.
Yeah. We'll see. Little by little. Baby step by baby step. Hey Yang, how's it going? I didn't see when you hopped in.
Yeah, I'm doing good. I must admit, this meeting was originally, on my calendar. I set up a recurring series for it, but I had a deadline for it as well, which is a couple of weeks ago. So after that, this just slipped in my calendar, and, and I just totally, forgot about it until Ricardo yelled at me today saying, "Hey, Andrew is asking where you at," and I was like, "Crap."
Well, I'm glad he yelled at you. I should have pinged you. But no, it's all good. I'm just trying to think. Have you been making any progress on your implementation for admin network policy?
We are sort of like identify the work items that needed to be done in the project. So yeah, I guess that's some progress. But
Yeah.
so we already have someone who's on the same team. She is actually starting to do some implementation of the functionalities, such as the same labels, not same labels thing. So the plan is sort of like to have these functionality work in Entra native policy first, and then we roll it out for the admin network policy as well. Yeah. So
Cool.
we
Sounds
think
good.
that's the only functional bit that Entra haven't been implemented yet.
Yeah, totally. We're kind of in the same boat. I just wanted to get an update and see how you're doing, if you've run into anything.
Yeah, nothing much. I do also have I don't think there's any update on there yet, because I opened a PR against my own repo for amending the original cap.
Oh, cool.
So if you don't have any sort of like major comments, maybe it's probably easier for me to actually open the cap against the Kubernetes enhancement repo, and then
Yeah, that'd be better.
Yeah.
Sure. Once you do that, I'll give it a read over. It'll
Alright,
be good. It's good book. It'll keep Tim happy if we keep that cap updated. So it's
Yeah.
good bookkeeping. Cool. Yeah, I don't think I really have anything else to add for today. If folks, again, that are watching want to get involved, I need help with the website. I did the beginnings, but I don't want to do the rest of it. I want folks to kind of take these are good places to get involved. Good first issues. So we have issues. Go grab.
So Andrew, will you organize some get together or something like that at KubeCon for this group? Or
I mean, I assume Sig Network is going to, so I was gonna just piggyback off of that.
Okay.
But I'm fine. I don't know who else is gonna be there out of this group
I will.
besides you and me. Yeah.
Yeah,
Rahul, Yang, Vinay, Ben. I don't think
I guess.
are all y'all gonna be there.
No.
I don't think I'm gonna be there. Yeah.
Okay.
I will not.
Yeah, so I'm not. This is Binay. I'm not going to be there because we have travel restrictions at Google.
I gotcha. Yeah, no worries. Cool. Good to know. Well, it'll be a
I
bummer
mean,
to.
unless I'm a speaker, then they recommend that don't go. So
Yeah,
hopefully
yeah,
things will get better next year.
yeah. We're in the same boat. Cool. Okay. Well, hey, thanks for coming today, Rahul. Thanks for sparking that conversation. Like, I just want to take some of these things out of conversation and into implementation world.
Yeah.
Hopefully soon. But it's just about having time to do it. So I get that. Otherwise, that's all I got. Thanks for coming, everyone. And we will talk to you next time. Well, actually, wait a second. Is next time's KubeCon. So we're probably going to cancel next meeting, I would assume, unless someone else wants to run it. So if you do, drop in the Slack and we can definitely do that. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Andrew, do we hang here, talk about Kaping, or do we set up another channel?
Let's set up another channel. I'll send you one. Cool. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you later.
Bye.